Shavua Tov, everyone. Welcome to Tillis Tells Stories for Saturday night. The title of this week's video is Expensive Advice. I expanded and enhanced it from the English language Israeli weekly Living Jewish. After 12 years, his exile with poverty was finally over. Forced by debt to leave his family and his small inn, the Jew had worked in a distant town as a tutor of young boys. Now, having painfully amassed 900 rubles, he was anxious to return home and resume his life. Being a chassid, however, the tutor first stopped in the town of his Rabbi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, in order to secure his blessing. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, one of the most popular rabbis in Hasidic history, was a close disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, successor to the Baal Shem Tov. He is best known for his love of every Jew and his active efforts to intercede for them against seemingly adverse heavenly decrees. Also an accomplished Torah scholar, many of his teachings are contained in the posthumously published Kedushat Levi. He left for heaven in 1810, a few days after Simchas Torah. The tzaddik greeted his chassid warmly, and then, much to the latter's surprise, said to him, "If you would like, not only a blessing, I will give you 3 pieces of advice, but for each you must pay well. The first will cost you 300 rubles. The poor teacher was startled by the large sum, but then, considering that it was the tzaddik himself that was making the request, and also that it is written in Psalm 119, verse 72, words of Torah are more precious than gold, he laid the money on the table. The Berditchev said, here's the first piece of advice. When a man doesn't know which way to turn, he should always go to the right. Now, for the next word of advice, you must pay another 300 shekels. The chassid experienced a tremor of shock at these words. What was the meaning of such costly advice? Again, another 300? But he couldn't refuse his Rebbe, and so he counted out the money. An old husband with a young wife is half a death, pronounced the Rebbe. And now, if you want to hear the last advice, you must pay the same amount once again. This final demand left the poor tutor paralyzed. His years of struggle, his long-awaited homecoming, what would be? With trembling fingers, he opened his purse and emptied the contents onto the table. Right away, though, his sadness dissipated and was replaced by a peculiar feeling of joy. Come what may, he had obeyed his beloved Rebbe and trusted him. Surely the Rebbe meant him no harm. What was the third piece of advice? Said the Rebbe, remember, my son, to believe only what you see with your own eyes. That's my final advice. Now go in peace. Lech l'shalom. Gegas u'tachet. The bewildered chassid began wandering the surrounding streets before heading home, wondering how to proceed without even a single kopek, 100 to a ruble, while standing at an intersection. He saw several policemen running towards him. At top volume, they called out to him, quick, there's a price on the heads of those thieves. Did they turn right or left? After only a moment of hesitation, for after all he hadn't seen, he remembered that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's first advice and spoke up, to the right. Later that afternoon, the teacher had 600 rubles in hand, his share of the reward for catching the thieves. Happily, he headed for home, but as it had become dark, he decided to stay the night at an inn. The elderly innkeeper was about to admit him when a young woman appeared from the back room and sternly turned him away, saying, we have no room, go elsewhere. An old man with a young wife, the tutor thought to himself, and he resolved to take his rest, huddled in the courtyard of the inn. Around midnight, he was startled by a wagon from which alighted 2 men, one carrying a glinting sword. Enhanced by his Rebbe's second words, he yelled, murderers, murderers, catch them! The inn was aroused and the would-be killers fled into the darkness. The grateful old man, who had suspected a plot, rewarded the chassid with 300 rubles. With precisely as 900 rubles restored to him, he was excited to continue on his way. He arrived in his old town to find it unchanged. However, no one recognized him. So profoundly had his dozen years of hardship altered his features. His inquiries about the innkeeper, meaning himself, who disappeared many years ago, brought knowing looks from the townsfolk. Yes, said one man, we remember him. A fine family, but sad to say, his wife has gone off the straight path. That night, the returning husband and father stood outside his house. In the pale moonlight, he saw a young man stealthily enter the house. Hours later, he left as secretly as he had come. If it weren't for the echo of his Rebbe's words, he would have left his home again in shame, but this time forever. The following day, he returned, laden with gifts, and was greeted with a welcome he had pictured in his imagination so many times. Only now his heart was wrecked with pain and worry. When he and his wife were finally alone, the man turned to her and anxiously asked, "The whole town is talking. What is going on? I have even seen with my own eyes that..." "Stop," his wife pleaded. "Had you forgotten our youngest son? Didn't you notice that he's not here? The Duke seized him years ago as security on our debt. All of my weeping and begging failed to help. But thank God we have been blessed with a good son. Every night he comes to me and I teach him a little bit, some Torah, some blessings, very little, but he knows that he's a Jew." The chassid wept in wonder and awe at all that had transpired, for it was miraculously enough he thought that my Rebbe had the vision to see how events would unfold, but he had also the wisdom to see into my heart. For had he not demanded so dear a price for his words, I would not have had the strength to follow his advice, strength and determination. And perhaps, he told himself, the greatest wonder of all is that God enabled me, a simple Jew, to give up my entire fortune that I'd suffered so much time, loneliness, and hardship to acquire, when I would have more easily surrendered my very life. I selected this story because the sota, the suspected wife, is a prominent theme in the Torah reading of Naso, which we read today in synagogues. Shavua Tov. Have an excellent week.